Donald Trump made an appearance last night in neighboring Nevada, and he got quite a raucous reception from a crowd at Reno. I would imagine. You see, he's not doing a campaign in any way that is recognizable as a campaign to the usual, the conventional wisdom of the media and the political world. Mark Stein wrote a great piece about this the other day. Stein went to hear him. His daughter had gone to hear Trump in New Hampshire. And when she came home and was telling the stories about what it was like, what the experience was like, then his sons wanted to hear Trump. So he took his sons to Burlington, Vermont, and said that it is a remarkable campaign that he's running. You walk in, he went backstage and he said there are none of these people on cell phones talking about government minutia and advising the candidate what to say, how to parse his words. And he said Trump is just backstage having a good time talking with everybody. He has a very small group of retainers. And he said Trump then goes out and just wings it. Oh, he's got a Sharpie with him that he writes down a few notes on some blank paper and goes out, puts that down, and then just does his steady stream of consciousness. He was talking last night about football, making a comparison to how football has become like the rest of the country. In other words, soft.
What used to be considered a great tackle, a violent, head-on-head violent, if that was done by Dick Butkus, they'd say he's the greatest player. If that were done by Lawrence Taylor, it was done by Lawrence Taylor and Dick Butkus. And Ray Nitschke, right? Ray Nitschke. Used to see these tackles, and it was incredible to watch, right? Now they tackle. Oh, head-on-head collision, 15-yard. The whole game is all screwed up.
Yeah, he must have been watching the Steelers and Bengals. Because that was a pretty chippy game. Unlike the heartbreaker in Minneapolis yesterday in the latest version of the Ice Bowl, where tackling was really superb in that ball game. Now, the reason the 10-9 score is indicative of the cold, of course. You couldn't get a lot going in that weather when it was below zero. But the tackling that was taking place on the field, to watch Richard Sherman make a tackle, you got all these guys for years who tried to get on the ESPN highlight reels. They run up, and what they do is they just try to bounce off someone, throw their body. Sherman does it the old-fashioned way. He comes up, he puts a shoulder into a guy, wraps his arms around the guy, and he takes the guy down, which is why you don't see a lot of busted plays. The Vikings defense plays the same style. So the Vikings may be the successors in the NFC, the rising power, just maybe a year away. Just a thought I had while I was watching the game yesterday, and I hate to admit this. I was watching all of the breath come out of those people's mouths in the stands and on the field, and I wanted to be there in 6 degree below weather. I did. You dress warm, you don't necessarily worry about it. We have a caller with us this morning, and we've had a few. We'll take another one, though. You're on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. What's on your mind?
Hi, Bill. Last night I saw something very interesting on C-SPAN. It was the Jack Kemp Federation Forum. It was outstanding. Maybe you can look into that and on C-SPAN and talk about it tomorrow and give your opinion on what happened there.
I was on C-SPAN once, actually. Thank you for the call. Actually, I was not a guest. I remember I'd introduced Laura Ingram at a book signing, and I said at the book signing that I'd seen her on C-SPAN the previous Saturday. She suddenly shouted out to the whole crowd. She says, "Well, he has an interesting life." But one day, about a year and a half ago, I happened to be watching C-SPAN. I don't know why. And I called up a fellow on the air, and they put me on with him. And I got to argue with this left-leaning liberal for a couple of minutes. Made some very entertaining TV, which entertaining TV that's considered oxymoronic when it comes to C-SPAN. Bill Colley with you this morning on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. The telephone number to reach the program, 736-0300. You can also reach me, bill.colley@townsquaremedia.com. I do admit, I love the political arena. To me, it's like sports. I think Trump makes some great analogies there. The whole rough and tumble aspect of it. Trump is now being called. In fact, I watched the McLaughlin Group. Yeah, that's how exciting my life is. Trump is being compared a few weeks ago on McLaughlin Group. Eleanor Clift, she is the former sister-in-law of the actor Montgomery Clift. who has been gone a long, long time, which should tell you how old she is. But she was speaking to Pat Buchanan, and she said, Trump is just repeating everything you said back in the 1990s. And Buchanan didn't deny it. So over the weekend, Buchanan made an appearance on the Clinton News Network with Michael Smerconish. Smerconish is a talk show host from Philadelphia who does a show as well on CNN. He used to be a conservative, but then he palled around with Barack Obama for a while, said the country had changed, and he's like a politician himself. He put his finger up in the air to see which way the wind was blowing, and he's no longer so conservative. But this is the discussion the two men were having, and Buchanan very much says the Trump situation is a reaction to a symptom that was around 20 years ago, but is now recognized much more greatly by the American electorate.
Free trade and non-intervention. Was your timing off, or is he just the better, no disrespect intended, but is he the better messenger on these things?
Well, let me say on these issues, Trump has raised the very issues I raised in the early 90s, 1991, 92. I said these trade deals are going to be terrible. We're going to lose manufacturing jobs. We're going to lose factories abroad. The real wages of Americans are not going to rise. People are coming across the border. It's got to be stopped. What we've got now, 25 years later, Michael, is the proof that what we predicted has come to pass. And so Donald Trump and others who are taking up these issues can point out and say, look, here's what's happened. I mean, even Bernie Sanders, he was back there with me on these trade deals. And, of course, he's running now and doing extremely well, I think, for a fellow on the far left of the Democratic Party.
So assuming arguendo that you were ahead of your time, the question then becomes, are there enough remnants of the so-called silent majority left to take Trump all the way to the White House?
I think Trump is a very interesting candidate in this sense. I think he has cross-party appeal. Now, let me give you an example. If I were running this year and I were in Trump's shoes, I would go into Pennsylvania and Ohio and Michigan, and I would say, you want to know why your factories left this country? Because of Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton with NAFTA and GATT and the WTO. All those jobs and factories are in China now. Some of them are in Mexico, but they're the ones that did it. They're responsible. Now, that's the appeal of whom? Bernie Sanders right now. So this has a cross-party appeal. The issue of, free trade is out, and quite frankly, protecting jobs and protecting factories. And these issues, I think, are very much in today.
A statistic I saw over the weekend, I'll get to my caller in just a moment, be patient. Statistic I saw over the weekend said up to 20% of Democrats, registered Democrats, claim at the moment they'll be voting for Donald Trump. 20%. We have a caller with us. You're up next, and you're on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com.
Donald Trump's showmanship and his kooky faces he makes and his hairstyle and all that, I hope no one lets that fool him into thinking he would be a good president, because one of the best things I hear him saying is, if I don't know enough about it, and there's a lot of it I don't know about, I will put the people in place that are smarter than me at it and make sure that the right people are in the right place to take care of it. For instance, military, etc.
Well, if you think about it, Franklin Roosevelt, John Kennedy, and Ronald Reagan all went out and they tried to hire what they called the best and the brightest to staff their cabinets. No matter what party you're in this country, generally those three names get mentioned as being pretty decent presidents. People may disagree with some of the philosophy, but they were great leaders.
Well, I just hope that people don't get fooled by some of his kookiness and stuff, because I think he's a very intelligent man. Obviously, look at his bank account.
Yeah. It didn't come from anywhere. Thank you. Thank you very much for the telephone call. Yeah, he leadership. It was said about Franklin Roosevelt. I read some survey recently written by some liberal college professor who said, one of the brightest presidents America ever had, huge IQ. Not true. No, Roosevelt was a C student, at best. He wanted to spend most of his time on his stamp collection, didn't delve into a lot of intellectual arguments of his day, but he was a great leader. Leaders aren't necessarily people. Jimmy Carter was a brilliant man. Jimmy Carter was a nuclear physicist. Now, he's the only president, to my knowledge, who had that depth. I mean, that's like being a rocket scientist. But he was terrible as far as leadership goes. Roosevelt, on the other hand, He's kind of a middling guy when it comes to his intelligence and his interests in life. He likes to sit around and tell stories and drink whiskey with Winston Churchill and smoke cigarettes and cigars and, lots of brandy guzzled down. But what he did was, a good leader isn't necessarily the policy wonk. Hillary Clinton is called a policy wonk. She can talk a lot about healthcare and minutia and delve into that and, put people to sleep. Franklin Roosevelt led because of his personality. And even if you disagree with how he handled the country during the Great Depression, we were dang lucky he was in the White House on December 7th, 1941. Because he and Churchill was the same way. These were people who got out in front and said, follow me. Let's roll. Let's move. That's how you win. It's demonstrating courage, and it's also demonstrating a sunny disposition. Roosevelt would go on the radio and he'd say, you're going to win this war. And he had no conception of losing it. And he would say, we're going to build, he'd list a number of ships, and people would say, is he nuts? Has he lost his mind? And then we went ahead and we built even more ships than he called for. And Churchill was walking around through the bombed out rubble, and he'd put his hat on his cane and hold it up and wave it to the crowd and smile. And they'd cheer him and they'd think, you know what, we can get through this. Churchill himself was not smart enough to go to Eton and some of the other British schools that the upper crust went to, so his dad sent him off to Sandhurst to become a military leader instead. So for all the talk that we need a brilliant person in the White House, no. You need someone who knows their limitations, who will surround themselves with great people. And this is not an endorsement of Trump. It's an endorsement of anybody in that role. And then have the ability, when there's a crisis, to get out there and say, all right, I'm going to roll up my sleeves. Let's go. Here's what we're going to do. Join me. Coming up on 956, Bill Colley with you on Top Story this morning on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. I did not get into this today. Maybe tomorrow. This is a story by Kathy Hedberg from the Lewiston Tribune. And I'm reading through this morning before I went on the air and wanted to delve into this. I think there's a reason this is happening. 2 Texas billionaires bought up 38,000 acres of Idaho land. And then it goes on to mention that perhaps they have as much as 300,000 acres they have purchased in Montana. And I'm reading through this thinking, why would anybody want all of this land in Montana and northern Idaho? And then it mentions that one of them is the pastor of a church. They inherited their fortune from their father, and then they managed to grow it, speaking of smart people. But I think what I wanted to do, and maybe we'll do this a little later in the week if we don't get to it tomorrow even, I hope we do. Kelton Hatch is going to join us for an hour in the studio tomorrow morning after 9 o'clock news. But it mentions that Ferris Wilkes is married. He's the father of 11 children. He is the pastor of the Assembly of Yahweh Seventh-day Church near Cisco, a conservative Christian church that was founded by his parents. What people are doing is they're starting to look around. This is going to be a repeat, perhaps, of the fears of the 1990s. They're looking around at what could happen economically. And there is a lot of talk that we may be headed for a cliff, a severe downturn in our economy. I would imagine a guy who's got that kind of money and he and his brother can buy up land to the tune of 338,000 acres are thinking about a redoubt where Christians could settle and try and live in peace. And there are so many people out there who fear the excesses of our current culture. They're looking for a way to escape it, to wall themselves off from it. And they're looking at this as an opportunity, and they have the money to do it. 9:58. Bill Colley with you on Top Story. God willing, and the creek don't rise. I'll get to do this all over again tomorrow morning between 8 and 10 o'clock. Hope you can join me. Rush Limbaugh's program scheduled next following the news at 10 o'clock from Fox. Now remember, Sean Hannity will be briefly preempted this afternoon for as long as Governor Butch Otter talks. Governor delivering his State of the State address. We'll be carrying it here this afternoon live on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. We'll have a program called Glenn Beck after 4 o'clock news. Dave Ramsey tonight. All of that coming up. So I hope you can stick around. Build your entire day around talk radio. Why not? We'll provide a solution or two somewhere along the way.